Hey guys, Rick Stone here from Our Stoney Acres. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Today we are going to be talking about some strategies that will help you to grow more food from your garden this season. And so I hope to give you some strategies that will help you get more produce, more of that yummy organic produce out of your garden this year. Before we get started though, please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also do me a favor, we're just getting started over on Instagram, and I would love it if you would go down in the description and click the link and go follow us over on Instagram as well. And then make sure you stick around because I am going to be talking a little bit about the Gardening Academy and what that is as well. So that'll be at the end of the video. First off, I want to apologize for not being out in the garden. The weather just is not cooperating with us this spring for videoing out in the garden. Today it's windy, and besides that, the neighbors are having their roof redone, so it's noisy outside, so I apologize. Hopefully next week we'll be out in the garden. Okay, so let's talk about some strategies, some things that you can be doing that will help you to grow more food this year. So number one on our list of strategies for growing more food is to get started earlier, okay? So a lot of people don't recognize how resilient cold season crops are and how well they will do if they're planted early in the season. You should be getting your cool season crops in 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost, and you can extend your growing season a lot by adding a few simple season extenders to your garden. Things like hoop houses or cold frames are all really good options and will help you to grow a lot more. Or you could just go simple and just get some fabric row covers like you're seeing here in this cutaway. I'll just throw some fabric row covers over the top of some of my beds. That provides a nice warm environment, gets things started earlier, allows me to plant as much as a month sooner than I normally would for our area. And so fabric row covers, hoop houses, and cold frames are all a great idea. The last strategy that I have here for planting early actually involves warm season crops, and that is using what we call wall of waters, okay? So wall of waters are these water-filled clutches that you can buy that you can use to extend the growing season of your warm season crops. And it lets you get some of your warm season crops, things like tomatoes or peppers or melons or eggplants. It lets you get them planted weeks earlier than you would normally because it protects them from the cold weather when the plants are small, lets them get established in the garden, and they start to get bigger as the weather starts to warm up. So I use these wall of waters to get my tomatoes planted as much as 6 weeks before my last frost date. And so it's a great way to extend your growing season. There's a link down in the description that'll take you out to a post that I wrote on the website that'll give you more information on wall of waters, but they're a great option as well. So starting early is our number one tip. All right, number two is one that a lot of people will just go, well, duh, but a lot of people actually don't know this. And so that is planting your cool season crops twice in the year, okay? So what are cool season crops? They are things like leafy greens. So all of your lettuces, spinach, kale, arugula, all of those. Then we also have all of the broccoli family. So broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, kale, all of those. And then the root crops. So things like carrots and beets and turnips, radishes, all of those can be planted actually twice, because for most of us, we have 2 cool seasons in a year, right? Spring and fall. And fall is the one that often gets ignored because a lot of people get gung-ho about planting in the springtime and they forget about their fall garden, or they don't realize how much potential there is for growing in the fall. So plant in the spring all of those cool season crops, and then in the late summer, usually for most of us sometime in August, you're going to be planting again all of those cool season crops. They'll mature when the season gets cooler and right in those temperature ranges that they really like, and you'll have 2 harvests, double the harvest of lettuce and broccoli and cabbage. All of those things you can get twice if you plant it outright and make an effort to do that fall garden. Number 3 on our list is using succession planting. So what is succession planting? There's actually 2 different ways that you can use succession planting to grow more produce in your garden. And the 2 methods are, number 1, you've got, let's say we've got a 4 by 8 foot bed and we want to plant lettuce in it, okay? So if we were to plant that entire bed full of lettuce at one time, guess when it's all going to be ready? All at the same time, okay? And that's a lot of lettuce to be harvesting and trying to eat at one short window of time. And so by using succession planting, maybe instead of planting the whole bed, we might just plant one row, and then 2 or 3 weeks later we plant another row, and then 2 or 3 weeks later we plant another row, okay? And by the time we're planting that third row, the first row is finished and we're going to start harvesting. And as soon as we're done harvesting that one, then we're going to plant again. And then we'll move on to the next row, and then we'll plant again, and then we'll move on to the next row. And that allows us to get more production, kind of this continual harvest from the same bed. And you can do that with a lot of cool season crops, especially the leafy greens and a lot of the root crops. But you can also do that with some of the warm season crops. I'm thinking things like bush beans. You can plant in succession as well and kind of get that continuous harvest going throughout the season. So that's one way to use succession planting. The other way to use succession planting is by timing out the crops that you're going to be planting between the seasons. So spring, summer, and fall, we have 3 possible seasons that we could be growing in. And so if you plant it right, you could start out with, say, lettuce growing in one bed, and you could grow lettuce until the weather warms up, and then maybe you could put beans and maybe a zucchini plant in that same bed. And then when those start to mature, and you're going to take those out, and then you may replace it with fall lettuce or maybe fall broccoli or something like that. And so if we plan things out and time things right, we can kind of have this follow-on method of succession planting. So we plant one crop. When that crop is finished, we immediately plant another crop. And then when that crop is finished, we immediately plant another crop. And so that really gives you the potential for a lot of your garden beds to have 3 harvests throughout the year. And that really gives you the opportunity to have a lot more production. Now, of course, that's not going to work with every plant. A tomato plant is going to take a lot longer to grow. It's going to take up a lot more space. It's going to last into the fall longer. And so you may only get one harvest from that bed. But if you time it and work hard on making sure that you place things correctly, then you should be able to do the follow-on method of succession planting and have just a continual harvest of crops growing in those beds. Number 4 on our list is related to succession planting, and that is interplanting. And as what we're doing here is we're going to plant slower growing crops with fast growing crops. So the example that I like to use, because I do it quite often, is tomatoes and beets. Okay, so a tomato plant is going to grow really, really slow. It can't be planted until that last frost has happened. And so what I like to do is I'll leave a space in that bed for the tomato plant and plant beets all around in that bed. And eventually that tomato plant is going to take over that entire space. But the beets will be long done before that tomato plant gets so big that it takes over that space. And so you've effectively used the space twice while you're growing your tomatoes. So by planting those beets, or other things that would be really good would be things like radishes or lettuce or spinach. Sometimes even like bush beans would work really well in that. But the idea is that you're going to interplant a slower growing crop with a fast growing crop. And so by the time the slow growing crop takes over the bed, your fast growing crops are harvested and done, and you've used the space twice. So that is called interplanting, and it's a great method that you can use to get more production out of your garden. Number 5 on our list is planting more intensely. So every time you get some seed packages, there will be some spacing guidelines on the back of your seed package, okay? Ignore that. I want you to start thinking about planting more intensely. A lot of the seed packages are kind of designed with farming methods in mind, where we have long rows and mechanical harvesters and things like that, and that just doesn't work out for gardening. And so I want you to ignore the spacing rules and plant more intensely. So, all of the leafy greens can be planted in just, packed in there, and they'll do really, really well. Here's a picture of my overwintered spinach, and you can see how intensely it is planted, and it just has produced like crazy. And so I want you on a lot of crops to ignore those spacing guidelines and plant a lot closer than what they recommend, especially when it comes to between rows. I actually prefer beds over rows, and that gives you the opportunity to use up all of that space and really produce a lot of space. Now again, something big like a tomato, it's going to need 2, 3, 4 feet. So you're not going to be able to crunch those together. But a lot of the smaller plants, you'll be amazed at how closely you can plant them together and still get plenty of production. And that is a great way to use up and utilize your space. So again, just crunch them in there. One method that you could do some study on that would really help is called square foot gardening. And there's an entire book out there. It's been around for decades, called square foot gardening. And that is a method that is very intensive. And as long as you take care of your soil by adding compost and making sure that you're taking care of that soil, then you should be in really good shape using the square foot gardening method. So that intense planting is a great way to get more production out of your garden. Next on the list is to focus on bulk crops. So when I'm talking about bulk crops, I'm talking about plants that will produce a lot of weight, basically, in produce for the space that they're taking up. So I'm thinking about things like tomatoes or potatoes or sweet potatoes, maybe cabbage or summer squashes, kale even. Does really, really well in producing a lot of produce from one space. So if you focus on those big, heavy bulk crops that are very productive for the amount of space they take up, then that can really, really help to up the production in your garden. So think it through and plant the crops that you like, and you'll really get a lot more produce from your garden that way. Next on the list is growing up. And that is using vertical gardening methods. And here is a cutaway of one of our favorite trellises that we use in our garden. It's a cattle panel arch trellis that we use. And actually right here, there is a link. I did a video last fall where I showed you how I put this cattle panel trellis together. They're a great option for your garden and a great way to get a lot of the crops that kind of take a lot of space up off of your garden floor and up into the air. Okay, so crops that you're going to be growing on trellises are things like peas and beans, and then all of the squash families. So things like spaghetti squash or pumpkins or melons, cucumbers, watermelons, cantaloupes. All of those will do really, really well on a trellis. And all of those plants take up lots of space when they grow on the ground. A squash plant may produce maybe 3 to 5 squash for one plant, and it might take up 50, 60, 70 square feet of your garden for that one plant. And so that's not very productive. But if you get them growing up on a trellis, then you're taking up the airspace, and you still have all of that space down on the ground that you can plant other things. So any plant that sprawls like that, grow up on a trellis, any type of trellis, and you're going to get a lot more production out of the same amount of space in your garden. Number 8 on the list is using containers in spots where you normally couldn't grow. So this is a picture of my strawberry containers that we have, and they're over against the side of our house in an area that kind of has a sidewalk, and there's obviously no way that we could be growing in the ground there because it's all cement. But by using containers, you can actually take up and use that space productively. And so, you can go with the traditional clay pots, you can make wooden pots, you can use the fabric bags. All of those containers are really, really great. And think about, where can I put those containers that will, be space that otherwise wouldn't be used. So sidewalks and pathways in your garden, your deck, your porch and patio, all of those places are really good spots for containers that will allow you to grow more food. And you can throw some flowers in there in the mix, and it can make some really attractive and productive containers for you. So make sure that you use containers to take up all of those spaces that otherwise would be unused for growing. And number 9 on the list is related to number 1 on the list, and only this time we are going to grow later in the season. So we're going to do that again by using things like hoop houses, cold frames, fabric row covers to extend our growing season. And a lot of people don't realize that if you get things planted at the right time in the fall, you can actually extend your growing season all the way through the winter, depending on where you live. I know people in zones as cold as zone 4 that have food that they can harvest in their garden in a cold frame or a hoop house all winter long, okay? And so you need to learn those season extension principles, and that will help you to extend that growing season and make it more productive. We live in zone 6B, and we actually have things like kale and carrots and beets and spinach and lettuce and Swiss chard almost all year long. In fact, many of those that I listed, we harvest all year long through January, February, the coldest months of the year. So by using those structures, cold frames, hoop houses, and fabric row covers, and even greenhouses, you can extend that growing season and up the production from your garden. Okay, so there it is, my 9 tips on how you can get more production out of your vegetable garden this season. So hopefully that was helpful to you. If you have any questions or comments or other ideas, leave those down in the comment section below. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. And again, remember to subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell, and do me a favor and go follow us on Instagram as well. The link for our Instagram account is right down in the description below. Okay, really quick before we go, I just wanted to take just a minute to tell you guys about the Gardening Academy. So the Gardening Academy is a great way to support what we do here on YouTube, because YouTube ain't paying the bills, okay? The Gardening Academy is a great way to support. It's our monthly subscription service where I provide to you weekly content that helps you become a better gardener. So we have things like growing guides, we have mini courses, we have planting guides, we have expert interviews, we do a monthly Q&A session, just lots of great stuff that happens, something every week to help you become a better gardener and to teach you how to become a better gardener. And it's simple. You just go sign up, and we do a little monthly fee, and that helps to support our channel here, and we'll teach you how to become a better gardener. So please go down, check out the Gardening Academy. The link is down in the description below. Okay, that, my friends, is all I have for this week. Hopefully next week we'll be out of the garage and into the garden, because weather's starting to warm up a little bit. If we can just get it to cooperate rain and snow wise, hopefully we'll be out in the garden soon. So everybody have a great week. Happy gardening, guys.